Hello, hello. Welcome everyone to In the Stars. I am your host, Eli Gomez. I have been a little bit out of the public eye this week for various reasons, so you probably noticed I haven't posted as much on the Patreon or on my social medias. However, that's gonna change because I have a whole butt ton of stuff that I'm about to release next week. And this week, I actually had to take on a couple of extra shifts in the retail chain that I work for because it's the summer and many of the managers were on vacation. So, guess who ends up taking that responsibility? But I also got to go to Little Rock on Friday to celebrate a good friend's birthday. So, shout out to Kylie. She'll hate that I did that, but she's an amazing person, and we had a great time celebrating her 19th. I also just so happened to have a 12th house lunar return this past week, so that's really putting a lot of pressure on me to work on projects behind the scenes that will then be brought to the public later this month and into August, which I am so excited to share because I kid you not, I have been writing like an absolute maniac this past week and a half and some change because I have a really fun project that I've been working on, and I'm so excited to share this with you. And one of those projects is the start of Southern Astrology, which will be a patron-exclusive bi-weekly series, both podcast and written, where I discuss the southern states and localities of America. Each episode will be devoted to a different city or state in the American South. It isn't that I don't want to talk about other cities and places in their astrology, it's just that the American South is my home and I'm only 19 years old and a college student with only so many spins. And so we're going to start off with the American South. I may branch over into other places every so often, but for the most part, I'm really going to stick and hone the American South because there's really not a lot of good astrology information about that and push a lot more content out serving that region. I'm going to start off with Little Rock, Arkansas next week, and then I'm going to branch out from there, and it'll be a fun series, and I'm really excited for it. But anyhow, I have Nicole Cormier, the Numerology Lady, on this week's episode of In the Stars. We have a great conversation about numerology and how it works, as well as some metaphysician shop talk that you all will enjoy. Nicole is one of the most compassionate and kind humans I am lucky to have in my life. It's about time to have her on In the Stars. This is her first appearance. So let's go ahead and get straight into that conversation. I'm here now with Nicole Cormier, and she is the Numerology Lady. Welcome to the show, because this is your first time.
It is. It is. And thank you for having me.
So you're a numerologer.
Mm-hmm.
So what is numerology for those who may be completely new to anything metaphysical or anything divinatory? What is numerology, and then what brought you into being a numerologer?
Okay, so numerology is the mystical study of numbers. What I tell clients, one of the first questions I ask them is, have you ever had a numerology reading? And usually the answer will be no. So I say, have you ever had an astrology reading? And usually the answer is yes. So I say it's kind of like astrology, but with numbers instead of planets. And I talk to them about the numbers, and the numbers will reflect energy just the same way that planets will reflect energy, and numbers have planetary rulership, so sometimes the energy they reflect is very similar. But there are no houses or signs or anything like that. And that's usually what I tell people, and it tends to put them at ease because a lot of the time they don't know what to expect.
Numerology, as you were saying, is actually really a framework. Just like you were saying about astrology as well. Astrology is a framework and numerology is a framework. What about numerology just called your name? Like, how did you get into being a numerologer?
Okay. I had never heard of it before. Never. What I was familiar with in the realm of all of this, my grandmother, people used to come from far and away to visit my grandmother, and she would haul out her worn-out deck of playing cards, and she would read cards for them. That's the extent of what I knew. And one day I was reading this Canadian Living article in 1987 when I was in high school, and it was this short little article that had a bunch of keyword meanings for the numbers 1 to 9, and it showed you how to add your birthday straight across, and all these answers, told you what you should be doing for a living. And I read mine and I went, oh my goodness, they're so right. I love doing these things. So I went to school, and I had this article folded up in my pocket all the time, and I pulled it out when I needed a reference, and I hung out in the girls' bathroom when I was having spares, and this is what I did. I got people to give me their birth dates, and I added them up, and we're sitting there in the girls' bathroom, and I'm like, I'm going to tell you what your future's going to be. I'm going to tell you what you should be doing for a living. And I did that for a couple of weeks until my biology teacher became suspicious. And he just kind of walked right into the girls' room and hauled me out. And I didn't get in trouble, though, so thank you, Mr. Pettigrew. I did not get in trouble. He was thankful that at least you're doing something with math. So that was, and that's what I did. I kind of didn't do a lot after my HR division got shut down from the girls' bathroom, but a year later, I was getting ready to graduate, and this consultant team came in, and I didn't know that some of them were astrologers, and some of them did numerology, and I didn't. Because at that point in time, my conception of what a person who did this would look like would not be someone who showed up in a suit and a briefcase. And they took down, they had these intake forms, and they got the graduates' information, and for fun they did the parents too, and it was all free. The school paid a lot of money for it, and they were part of some consulting group. And basically they told me a much more detailed report on everything that the Canadian Living magazine article told me, and I was hooked. I'm like, I don't know what this is, but I gotta know. And that's, after that I started going into bookstores and sneaking things home and having a look at it, because my mother still was not convinced. I think that's a little weird. I don't want you doing what your grandmother does. So she was never quite on board, so my grandmother would never teach me how to read playing cards.
That's wild. And that's actually reflective of a lot of metaphysical professionals' experiences as well. It wasn't necessarily mine, because a lot of people are really shocked that I was actually in an environment that with people who were actually fairly comfortable with it. However, I was still part of the church at the time, and even though I was at a church who marketed themselves and their message as progressive and we're trying to progress Christianity, they did not want anything to do with anything that they could not see, touch, feel, which was really frustrating to them when I would go into youth group with my tarot cards. So even though they're like, we accept everyone and everything, but not that. And so it was really funny when that was how that went down. And other than that, it was really just a simple decision. Oh, I'm just going to leave the church. Problem solved, right? I didn't really have to worry about losing community or anything, because I was already finding community in other places. But it wasn't really that much of a difficult decision for me, and it wasn't really that hard for me to be able to go into metaphysics, because the people around me just didn't really care, or they were interested in it themselves. And so that's really funny that you're sharing that story, and I was like, oh, can't really relate, but that's actually really interesting, because then it also kind of, I'm sure, put little bees in their bonnets as well to be like, oh, maybe there's something to this.
Well, and when I was in my first year of university, I got my first deck of tarot cards, and I was like a kid with a dirty magazine, sitting up at night with a flashlight in my bedroom, reading the book that came with it, keeping it very quiet that I even had these in the house. And it's funny, because now my mother sends me people left, right, and center. So
I always like to say, watching people open their minds is a really fascinating thing to watch, because I had my first year of university last year. I went in there pretty headstrong. I was like, look, this is what I do. This is who I am. If you don't like it, you don't have to look at me. You don't have to talk to me. But this is what I do, and everyone should know. And so I was just like that. And a lot of people thought that was cocky, and I just didn't care. because I'm like, well, if like you want to be around the people who, accept you for who you are, and what better way to do that is to just go in first thing and say who you are, I'm like, that's really how you weed out the people who don't really want to listen to you real fast. But then it's really funny because then a lot of those people who may have been like, I don't like what you do, that's witchcraft, and I don't want anything to do with it, are like, well, maybe could you maybe, give me a little bit of a sample of something? Like, yeah, I don't have a problem doing that. Yeah, even though I can come across as very intense, I don't mind, showing people, just a little bit of what I do. In fact, I do that a lot. But I don't just give free readings, but I give them a little sample of what I do. So yeah, I always find that process super fun. And so that's neat that you were able to do exactly that in the girls' bathroom.
Yes.
Fantastic prep, because look at you now. Look at you now. You're the numerology lady. So kind of got into it just by looking at a magazine. And I think that's how a lot of people get into astrology as well. A lot of people get into it by looking at horoscopes. A lot of people get into psychic phenomena through periodicals as well, because there's usually those little ads at the bottom of the page, even still today, of like, hey, you want a psychic reading? Call this number. So what would you tell people as like a good just rule of thumb? Who's reputable, who's not? What are some things you can look out for? What are some things that might be a little bit too bizarre, that might not be credible? What are some good professional green flags?
I would look for somebody. I mean, most of us are on social media. So the first thing I would tell someone is, if you enjoy their videos, if you like the information that they're putting out, then start from there. But that being said, I mean, there's people that I followed in my early days on TikTok that I thought were really wonderful until I bought something from them and went, God, this is garbage. You don't know what you're talking about. It's hard when you don't know anything to, because you look at a lot of the videos and you just kind of, you like what you see, and it grabs, 30 seconds worth of information. I would say to watch people who harp on the same couple of things over and over again, because that's not necessarily showing that they know something, but they figured out what. There's information that catches the algorithm, and then there's useful stuff to pass on to people. So I guess that would be the first thing. I personally I can only really tell you what turns me off. I get turned off when I see people talking about angel numbers all the time. I get turned off when I see people haul out not necessarily tarot cards, but oracle decks. And I know there's going to be people that'll hear this and they'll say, but that's not a bad thing. That's not a red flag, or, but it all boils down to your taste. If you're into something, you're going to follow it and consume more of it. But I would just be wary of people who repeat the same little bits of things all the time.
Or like people who just read one book and then proclaim to be an expert. Yeah.
Yes. It's also, it's like buying a car. You find out where your friends bought their car, where they get their car maintained, and you check these places out. And you do your due diligence. It's the same thing in the reading community. A lot of people, it's like a lot of people know each other. It's still like a small town, even though the internet is a big place. And so you ask around, do you like Joe Smith? Did he give you a good reading? And you go from there. If somebody is no good, you'll hear it through the clients. You will. Eventually it will come out through the clients. So that would be the biggest thing to do, because the reality is, really, we can all present whatever front we want on the internet, and sometimes when it looks, it can look really glitzy and really professional, and then you're sitting there in a reading with someone who's reading from an actual book, because they don't know. And you're, if you're me, you're sitting here thinking, I've paid for this.
Yeah. Like, one thing that I find to be extremely problematic are all of those accounts of people who are professionals who then just repeat what other, maybe more popular professionals say. Mm-hmm. So I see that all the time. Like, I'm around a lot of professional metaphysicians who have, fair amount following. And then I'll get a lot of those videos on my For You page of people who are wannabes, who just repeat literally word for word the same things that they say in their videos, which is something else to look out for. Like, if it sounds like information, if an account sounds like it's just echoing information off of somebody else, that's something also to look out for. And the thing is like, a lot of times, especially, and I see this in university all the time, a lot of times people are very skeptical, and they don't want to be able to maybe go deeper into explore the subject because it seems so, like, gargantuan and huge and, like, bigger than they are, when really it is just as simple as go online, explore around. What are some people that you find to be phony? What are some people that you find to be reputable? You got to start somewhere. You can't just go in and just start, like, assume and leech on to one person and only that one person because it was the first thing you saw on TikTok. Or you can't just go in there and really be able to just automatically know all the answers. No, it took me a solid good, like, I really discovered the power of metaphysics in 2020, right before the pandemic. Like, that was when I had discovered, like, I actually started giving thought to astrology. However, it wasn't until 2023 where I actually really started studying it from an academic perspective, because it took me that long just to figure out who was credible, who was not, where are good sources of information, where are not. It takes that long, and a lot of people don't have that patience, and so they just expect, gimme. But yeah, they expect to know all the answers like that, and that's just not how that works.
Yes. I would, if I was advising someone anyway online, I would tell them to, go through the person's, all their socials, find the platform they really shine on.
Yeah.
Find that platform and look at them and watch it. See where they're happiest posting. And it might not be TikTok or Instagram, it might be their blog. And see what they share.
Yeah, it's okay to be nosy. In fact, it's strongly encouraged. When you're looking for good readers and good metaphysicians, be nosy. Look at their accounts. Look at their court connects. No, I'm not saying that. I mean, in Arkansas, all court documents are free. You can go online and search them up for free. So if there's a metaphysician who has maybe a lot of court cases against them, just saying, you can look up their doing business as name, and you can see if there's any, like, if they have 13 different cases open right now, they probably are not someone that you might want to be reading or get a reading from, And so it's okay to be nosy. It's okay to snoop. I do that with every reader.
Well, yeah, I just kind of assume that anybody that comes to me for a reading has already snooped real hard. I just assume it. So. Yeah.
One thing that my friends just are like, why do you do that? Like, because they think that I post my whole life on here, and that's not exactly the case. Like, I really keep a lot of, personal matters off, but, like, whenever they are, maybe big enough to be able to, like, really be affecting, like, the business itself, or at Starseek Astrology, I do share, and I don't really hold that much back, because I think it's so important to be authentic and to be upfront with people, because you don't want people to have to go in and snoop and then realize that you are not who you say you are. You know what I'm saying? And so it's really good to be saying who you are and being authentic as a reader, because you're going to have more clients if people see that when they snoop and they find the same information that you share, that you're authentic, and they're going to want to read with you.
Exactly.
It's really as simple as that. Alright, it's time for some patron shout-outs. As I mentioned every week, patrons are those who financially support this podcast. And not everyone knows this, but podcasting is definitely time-taxing. I spend about, probably 5 to 7 hours each week just devoted to In the Stars. Whether that be recording the conversations with guests, or recording segments, editing, writing, planning, marketing, etc. Podcasting is not easy, and it is very, very time consuming. However, because of patrons, I get compensated for that time. So even though Patreon is a platform to support a creator, it isn't necessarily a buying or selling of services platform. It's not like you pay to get a product or you pay to get a service. It is a place where I can also give juicy discounts to Patreon members for supporting, as well as exclusive readings and service access to StarseekAstrology.com that patrons get from time to time, as well as some bonus content and classes exclusive to Patreon. And I'm not gonna lie, I really love the Patreon platform because it allows me to do exactly that. Unlike any other platform that I have come across on the internet. And it also allows me to reach a wide group of people from around the world. That is one thing about Patreon that I absolutely love, and it's very user-friendly. So you can even adjust now the notification settings, so like maybe if you don't want all the emails, because I know Patreon sends emails, I like the email notifications because the punch notifications absolutely drive me insane. I can actually go in those settings and fix that now. So that's actually super fantastic, and I love the user-friendly Patreon platform. And in fact, one of the classes that I offer for free to the $5 level and up is Aligning Your Venus in the Starseek Astrology Patreon. This is a beginning level class where all you need to know is how to cast your own natal chart and locate your Venus, which I even show you how to do, and I'll walk you through how to do that. So even if you're truly a beginner and you know absolutely jack shit about astrology, you will be able to know how to navigate this class, and I can guarantee you it is very fun, and you'll have a very good time listening to the recording, maybe multiple times, so that way you can kind of understand and really relish in the information and let it sit and marinate in your head. So there's a lot that you can get out of just that class, even if you know absolutely nothing, which is why I also offered that class for free for the $5 level and up in the Starseek Astrology Patreon, because it kind of needs like a little introduction to astrology. What is it like having a class with Eli? Because I do classes from time to time, so it's your little tester, but you get a lot of information out of it. But anyhow, here's a shout out to every patron of the Starseek Astrology Patreon. We got Lori, Jen, Nicole, Glenn, Matilda, another Nicole, Issy, Loremaster 3000, Denise with those cute little emojis, Rose, Moon, Kim, Kirsten, and Jenny. Welcome everybody. We have grown over the last few months, and I am looking forward to introducing the Southern Astrology series that I know you all will absolutely love. By the way, patrons, I am doing recommendations, so would love to hear which cities, states, and localities you want me to discuss in the astrology and give some predictions for. They can even be smaller cities. I'm not restricting the population size, as long as I can have the chart information for it. Sometimes some cities are harder to find than others, like New Orleans took me 3 months to find, but that was because I had to go into some very dark corners of the world in order to find that. And I don't mean dark as in like the dark web, I mean dark as in like very hidden and tucked away, because it's not exactly public knowledge. But, you know, an astrologer will do what an astrologer will do in order to find the information that they need in order to cast a chart. Believe me, I will do it. I will leave it at that. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get right back to the conversation with Nicole. Kind of going back to more specifics on numerology. Mm-hmm. Whenever you began studying numerology, like really getting into it, what were some of the good foundational principles of numerology that you think that everyone should at least know before getting a reading?
One of the first things I was told when I started studying it was find one system and stick to it for 5 years. And learn it inside and out. Because there's a perception that numerology is extremely ancient. And a lot of books will talk about Pythagoras. And numerology isn't ancient. And I can say that because it revolves around English, which isn't ancient. And also, there are so many formulas and calculations. It's not like astrology where you could put astrologers in a room from all over the world and they can all agree on what a square is and what a sextile is, and they can tell you, they all agree on the first house or the 8th house, or, you know, things like that. It doesn't matter what the system is, they can all agree on these things because there's this solid body of work. With numerology, there's all kinds of different systems and all kinds of different calculations, and numerologists sometimes invent their own placements. So to me, that says this is new. So the first person that ever sat down and talked to me about it, who knew anything about numerology and used to teach locally in Halifax, said, find one system, please stick to it for 5 years. and then branch out if you're still nosy. And then, you know, also made a point of find one author, read as many of their books as you can, and learn, basic along the same lines. Stick to, kind of keep your focus narrow for a little bit, even though you're going to want to do the opposite.
That was kind of what was also told to me as well, is,
Mm-hmm.
when you are first really figuring out if it's a credible subject matter, you're going to experience, and you're going to want to, open up the floodgates as to all the information you can possibly get. But once you really want to start getting good, like once you already determine that, it's a credible subject matter and that you want to learn it and
Mm-hmm.
master it, I really liked that. I really like that you said that you have to then go from, feeling like the whole world is open to you, until really narrow and structure your approach, because
Yes.
mastery does not happen when you just allow anyone and anything to just come in and you're just like, oh yeah, welcome, welcome, welcome. You have to
Yes.
really learn what's already what
Mm-hmm.
you like, a good system, because numerology, as you were saying, there's so many different systems. What's the system that you practice?
Well, I started with Pythagorean, and I started with books written by a man named Matthew Oliver Goodwin, and he was an engineer. So he had this approach. You could see it in his books. I mean, at the time that I started, it didn't occur to me, but years later, I looked back at his books and I went, "Oh yeah, you can totally see that man's an engineer." And just the way that he approached it was, he broke it down in such precise ways that it made it very easy to learn and very logical. He took a lot of the woo out of it. So when I read, I learned really solid things. I learned about placements. I learned about calculations. I learned how to do a lot of delineations. And then after that, I found Chaldean numerology. And I kind of found it at about the same time, but I sort of put it on the back burner because I was trying really hard to do what I was told and not branch out all over the place. And so I found Chaldean numerology at about the same time that I found the Crowley Tarot, and I was struggling with trying to figure that out. And one day I opened up this book that I had on Chaldean numerology, and all of a sudden the Crowley Tarot started to make sense. And that's when I thought, well, what's going on here? Why is this working? And that was that tarot deck actually was the gateway drug to astrology and more numerology. But that's after I found Chaldean numerology and worked with not so much their calculations, but the letter number key, and then started redoing my own chart with this new key, and I went, oh, this is so much better. That really is more me than this other thing over here that wasn't really me, and the interpretations of the numbers were different. And so at this point now, it's I've been in my requisite 5 years, so I started to branch out, and I found not just Chaldean numerology. I studied Vedic numerology because there was a community for Vedic studies in Eastern Canada from Halifax out to Toronto, and I thought it was, really fascinating and interesting. And when I started to study Vedic numerology, all the planets, they really focus on the planets in the Vedic studies, and so that meant more trips to the bookstore, more trips to the library. And at this point, I think I was probably doing tarot readings on the weekend at Little Mysteries, and pretty much all my money went back into them because I would turn around and raid the shelves.
Yeah. So did you have any mentors along the way?
Yes and no. I had people in the community in Halifax, other witches that did things, did readings and whatnot. I did take, a couple of workshops here and there. Most of them were done by actually astrologers who taught this on the side, and their whole thing with it was, well, here's this little thing you can learn, and it's kind of cool, and you can haul it out and have fun with it at parties, but if you really want to do serious work, come to my astrology classes. And I kept looking at numerology going, but I'm having so much fun with this, and I'm doing these really good readings, and I don't think it's a party trick. And so I just kind of put a little distance between myself and a lot of them. Most of the people around me were interested in astrology, and I just wasn't. I like to read about planets and whatnot as they related to numbers, but it just wasn't my thing.
Yeah, and I always tell people who may be new to metaphysics or who ask me a lot of really good questions about astrology is not for everyone. If you know that your passion is something metaphysical, because I knew mine was something metaphysical from like looking back at my life, I popped out of the womb wanting to do something in metaphysics. I just didn't know what metaphysics was like consciously just yet. I just knew I wanted to be doing some kind of something of that nature. And I would say that astrology's not for everyone, numerology's not for everyone, but maybe if astrology's not for you, like you were saying, numerology might. Or maybe if numerology's not for you, maybe astrology might. Or if none of them are for you, maybe tarot. There's space for any reader of any modality at the table. And that's something important to keep in mind as well, is that just because one thing may not be for you doesn't mean that it might not be for somebody else, and that's it. I'm really glad that you brought that up, because that is something that I oftentimes find myself telling people.
Mm-hmm.
So you were talking about how you were taking a lot of workshops and classes and how a lot of them were astrologers. So where did you go from there? Like, you were talking about how in your studies that was kind of your class setting where you were really developing your numerological skills. How did you go from there, like in your own personal studies?
I carried a campfire notebook and a pencil around with me, and every time I met somebody, I did their numbers. And Halifax is not a huge city. I think at the time there's like 350,000 people in it, so it's big enough that not everybody knows everybody. But everybody kind of knew that there was this weird girl walking around town telling people their fortunes, and she had a little campfire notebook, and she did up your birth date, and it was weird, but people liked it. And I just did that. I just talked, because that's what we do at home. We just talk to people. We just talk to anybody. And so I used to get teased. My Aunt Barbara used to tell me all the time, "They're going to put you on a milk carton." Because I used to talk to everybody. And I used to do them in the public gardens. I used to do them at all the coffee houses on Spring Garden Road. I did them sitting on the retaining wall down at the waterfront. I did them everywhere. And that's how I worked at it and figured out what I liked and didn't like and what was working and wasn't, because I just logged in so damn many readings.
That's kind of how it was for me in astrology as well. Like, I had taken a lot of classes already and had many different conversations with professionals, and I would, whenever I would just be going around as well, like as before I was a professional, like before I was professionally practicing, that was also like making personal observations was how I went beyond the class setting. Like, that's kind of how you can tell when someone's going to be a professional someday or not, or how holds really a lot of potential, is they can take whatever they use in the classes and build on it. And watching the observations click, watching and being able to apply the knowledge from the class setting is truly a magical experience, not only for the student, but also the budding professional. And that's great that you were sharing those stories as well, because that was very similar to my experience as well. Like, I would just go around and like being like, oh, I worked at this store and this manager was asking me about, they knew I took a couple classes and they were, wanting to see what it's about. So I did their stuff and I told them and they're like, oh my God. And, and then having a notebook as well. Like, I have so many freaking notebooks from observations. It's not even funny. And how long did that campfire notebook last you before you had to get a new one?
I used to go through one of those every week. And after a while, I had to graduate up from they used to laugh at me because I would walk into this one bookstore to buy my notebook. And one day, one of the girls just looked at me and she said, "Don't you want one like this?" It was much bigger. But And today I have a spiral Hilroy I carry around with me, and I still do it. I have a bigger purse, so I have a bigger book, but I still do it. I still have stuff to, sometimes I use my phone, but most of the time I still haul out a notebook and paper, and a pencil, and do their numbers up for them.
A lot of times, people online in the pop numerology sector of the internet will talk about, oh, this is what this number means for you. This is your life path. Or, oh, this is your hillbilly day spa number. And you can calculating it by calculating each of the numbers on your driver's license. Or, like just a whole bunch of made up crap. And so, what are the numbers that you use the most, and what do they mean?
I work a lot with the life path. The last 6 months I've gotten very turned on by life path readings. So I've been experimenting. And not the life path itself is it's your whole birth date added up straight across. And, I mean, there are rules, but basically just reduce it till you get to a single digit. That's the easiest way to do it. But lately I've been very much into life path readings. The traditional, what I call like the classic core chart that I set up, because I was never taught a core chart. Any book I ever read, any workshop I ever did, just threw a bunch of placements and calculations at me. I learned watching the astrologers. I taught myself watching what they did and set up my charts like them, which is why they are in circles. It's why they, and people used to laugh when they would see what I did, but I didn't have anybody telling me, put this here, put that there, and use this. So I figured out, watching astrologers, well, I need a placement that tells me this, I need one that tells me this, I need one that, and so for me, I have a cornerstone, and the cornerstone placement is, a cornerstone of a building is what sets the whole building. So I've always put the person's cornerstone right in the middle of the chart, and then everything else radiates out from it like the spokes on a wheel. And I got that idea from a man that I read some of his work years ago. His name was Michael Brill, and I don't know if he's still around writing, but he wrote some really good books on numerology. And he talked about, the cornerstone, or he had another number he liked to use, and how everything should radiate out from that. So I thought, right, this is what I'm going to do. And it worked. So I like the cornerstone, I like the expression, I like the heart, I like the destiny, I like their life path, I like their birth date number, their day number, and those I can start with. And like I said, I've gotten really into opening up somebody's date of birth and doing life path readings, because I still go to school. I still take classes. And 6 months ago I took a class on how to open up somebody's birth date. And, figure out an expression and a destiny and a heart without needing their name. And I thought, this is great, because I have so many clients that names tend to be a source of irritation for them. In our mutual community, there are a lot of people who don't necessarily want to tell you what their full name at birth is, because it's a big source of emotional pain for them. So, and this was perfect. I didn't have to ask people for their names.
Yeah, that's something too as well, is that being able to realize that whenever you're in the reading setting, not every client is going to want to just tell you the information that you need to really give a good, complete reading. And kind of really making sure that you're not just barging in on people's traumas, and instead being able to be a good listening ear when that does happen as well. To be like, hey, yes, I do. I might need your name for XYZ reason, but here's the thing. Just because, all of the memories that that might be attached to it, or all of the, maybe the struggle and pain that it might bring up, and that now you're here, and we're able to acknowledge that, yes, the past did happen, but yet where can we build from it? Because I'm assuming that just like astrology, numerology also shows potential, where you can go and how you can be successful, whatever that means to you, and how you can live the life that you want to live. So sometimes being able to have to really get down in the depths of the areas of life that we may not want to venture down to that much might be where we find the keys to unlocking our fullest potential.
Yes.
Kind of moving on to a slightly different topic. What are some things online that you see that just make you want to strangle somebody, or about numerology? Like, whether that be just blatant misinformation or maybe just really glib things that people say. Like, what would you say is your online buttons that just get you going?
If you were born on the 6th, you're always going to be like this. Oh, that drives me nuts.
I don't really see too much of that.
I get it. There are certain characteristics of numbers, just like, it's the same thing when I turn on social media and I see people. If you have a Venus in Scorpio, then you're all of these things. And I do the same thing. I roll my eyes and scroll on by. Because I know it takes a whole chart. And I know you've got to do something to get them in the door. And for people who really thrive on that certain platforms like TikTok and Instagram, and where you could throw something out there. I know they're throwing them a bone, but sometimes it's just really irritating because I'll hear people recycle a lot of it and be like, that's not even right. What you're saying isn't even right. And then go through the comments and be like, stop agreeing. She's not saying anything right.
Oh yeah, that just drives me nuts. Like, I was watching I actually talked this, I never let this go. I was talking about this on the podcast a couple weeks ago. And it was this lady who was going on being like, Mercury is where your money's at. If you look at your Mercury, that's where you're going to bring in money and make money. Because let's just be honest, Mercury rules the whole chart. And I was like, oh my God. This video had at least 400,000 views, and it was, everyone in the comments was like, oh, I love Mercury. I'm like, I want to just throw the phone out of my third floor flat apartment window. Like, I was like, what in the Sam Hill? Like, people who just make up crap. And then that's what goes viral because it's what people agree with, and people want to be all pop and ditzy and go with the trends. Yes. And I'm like, I just want to just, like, if I could just go through my phone and just be like, wake up, people! This is fake!
Yes, and that's why I've had to learn to breathe and scroll on by, because those people aren't going to change, and they existed before social media. It's just that they weren't getting that much attention. So,
yeah,
but it's not going to change. The thing that gets into my craw the most are the date portals and the angel numbers. So,
what are date portals?
They started on Facebook. Oh my God, they started on Facebook. It's August 8th. It's the 8-8 portal. It's the ancient Egyptian Pleiadian intergalactic portal.
Oh, we're talking about like the Lionsgate portal, yes. And yeah, yes. Okay. I didn't know at first what you were going with the date portals, but yeah, yes. I do remember every year at around that time, everyone starts talking about it and the internet goes crazy.
Yeah, and it's it's as old as Facebook, so it's not really all that ancient, but people go nuts for it. And now I guess now it's become a thing. It's in the collective consciousness now. So, but I look at it and I'm like, you guys are nuts, and that person is laughing all the way to the bank.
Yeah, I'm like, here's the thing about all of those things. Do you really think that our calendar system is the end-all be-all of all things universe?
No. There's other calendar systems in use.
Yeah, there's so many different calendar systems. And how does numerology show, like, what is numerology's role in the calendar system if it is not clearly through those number portals?
Well, numerology revolves, as I practice it, it revolves around the calendar that we currently use. But if I lived in a culture that used a different calendar, using this calendar is not going to do anything for me.
Yeah, it's all about perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's how astrology works as well.
And the thing is, as far as calendars go, I mean, the calendar we're using now was brought in, and of course now I'm having a brain fart and I can't remember what year it was brought in. But it'll come to me at 2 o'clock this morning. I'm going to call you. But you know, before that we used another calendar, and I'm sure everything was fine. And before that we used another calendar, and I'm sure everything was fine. Collectively, we all, and that's why I say things like the 8-8 portals are not really a thing, but they'll become a thing because they'll become part of the collective consciousness, just like using the calendar we're using is part of the collective consciousness, because we're all supporting it and upholding it by using it every day.
Yeah, and I don't think a lot of people realize the importance of the thought forms that we project into the world. That the whole idea of manifestation is exactly that. Like, do you want to uphold systems that are not serving you, or do you want to uphold systems that are benefiting everyone? Or do you want to amend, certain aspects of current systems to make them better suit everyone? And for example, like the calendar, that's kind of something that a lot of people, at first were like, oh yeah, we need to work every day, and that I wonder who said that, but and then now we're going down to 5 and 4 day work weeks, and so it's kind of like really kind of uphold, like, what systems do we want to really uphold and take into effect? And I think that numerology, like what you were saying, that it is based off of a person's perspective of the collective that they are in, or the collectives plural. And astrology works the same way too. Like, you can start observing any celestial object in the sky and come to your own interpretations of what that could be relative to Earth's point of view. And you can do the same thing on Mars. Like, if you go to Mars and you want to start observing where the planets are in relations to what's going on with Mars, you can do the same thing because it's relative to a point of view. And I think that it's really important that we mentioned that, because a lot of times people, or major skeptics, will always pull the, oh, well, they must know that, or they must not know that, the calendar that we know of today has only existed for this long. And that the world still functioned before. And when clearly we already know that, and we just know that that the system accommodates that as well.
Yes.
If you were to come across an extreme skeptic, someone who is just really super critical, before you might just decide to just give in and be like, hey, look, I'm not changing this person's mind, what would you say to them to maybe try and open their mind a little bit?
I have in-laws that I've sort of done this with. And all I do is I just say, if you think I'm not going to be able to tell you anything, tell me what day you were born. Don't even tell me your whole birthday. Tell me what day you were born. And I already know their first name. So I already know their I know their last name too, I would hope. I know their, and I tell them that. I know your public name, so I can do part of a chart. And I do part of a chart. It's not the whole chart, but it will tell me what they put out there to the world. And I tell them, this is what you're putting out to the world. And, in a couple of instances, people have, tried to be very stone-faced about it, and usually my other in-laws are sitting around the table laughing, going, ah, she got you. Oh, she was right. That is what you were like when you were little. So, but for the most part, if it was somebody I didn't know, like with them, they're my relatives. But if it was somebody I didn't know, I would probably just say, you know what, fine, you're right. And that would be it. I don't try to convince people anymore. What I used to many years ago, but I'm past that. If you don't want to, agree that numerology or astrology or any of that has anything to contribute to your life or to anybody else's, that's fine. Carry on.
Yeah. That's kind of the take on it that I do. Like at first, I was at first, like when I first started being a professional, I was very like, I wanted to tell the world what I did, and if they didn't want to hear about it, I was gonna show them wrong. Now, some people just are not in the place in their life where they can hear that message.
No, they're
And
not.
that was one of the hardest things I had to realize. Because if I were to just sit and try and convince everyone and evangelize astrology, or if you were to sit and try and evangelize numerology or all those things, like that doesn't really make us any different than those evangelical Christians that come into our comment section and be like, Jesus is the way, God only, God, truth, 100%, Jesus equals heaven. You know, it's it doesn't really make us any better than that. So, not that there's anything inherently wrong with spreading a message, but it can be inconsiderate whenever you're barging into other people's, like
Mm-hmm.
potential trauma or potential like you're trying to make them have to completely rework their whole thought forms on life, just right then and there. And it's not, even though there's not necessarily anything like completely wrong with that, it's not really ethical. So it's important for us as readers to realize that as well, which is something that I really think that you and a lot of the other people who I've brought on this podcast really do a really good job at doing, is like really pushing ethics, making sure that you're not just blowing through people's trauma, and also really approaching with compassion and
Mm-hmm.
respect of the other person, of the client. And I would say too that even though it's not necessarily our job as the reader to evangelize everything, what we can do is talk about it and share the message with people who are willing and ready to listen, and maybe just see where things go from there. Because the people who are willing and ready to listen might know other people who are not really willing and ready to listen, but maybe if they hear it from the people that they care about who are, they might be a little bit more open to it than a stranger on the internet. So that's just another thing to think about as well. With that being said, where are you at right now where people can find you? What are some things you're doing? And what all's going on in the Numerology Lady life?
Well, I am a Patreon, of course. I think we're all a Patreon. Everyone's a
I think,
Patreon.
yeah, most
Yeah.
people, most guests who I have on here have a Patreon.
Yes. And it seems to be a really good place for people like us. The vibe is very good there. So I am on Patreon as the Numerology Lady, and I pretty much the Numerology Lady across most platforms. I have a Numerology Lady account over at Substack, but what I mostly do at Substack is the Arithmancy magazine has its own publication there, so I still actually create it and distribute it exclusively to Patreon, but not to Substack. I had this thing in my head when I started using Substack that I was going to move everything over there. And what I found is I ran it like an A/B test for about 3 months. And I really do like Substack. That's where I do a lot of writing, but it's a different crowd over there. And the people that I'm picking up at Patreon are people that want to know from the very ground up. And they don't know really a lot, if anything, but they're interested and they're just very earnest. The people over at Substack know all kinds of things, and I can have I can have the discussions that I want to have about numbers or planets or whatever, and I don't without having to qualify or explain. I can just say something complicated, and right away I can have this huge involved conversation with somebody else about something completely obscure. And so I'm keeping them both for different reasons. But I am at Substack, and that is where I do a lot of writing. And I was thinking about what you were saying about evangelical Christians. I teach with a tarot that comes from France. It's one of the oldest tarot decks, and my copy obviously is not one of the oldest ones in existence, but it's a copy of one of the oldest ones, and I laugh when people say these things because the original tarot decks they're all based on Christian mysticism. All of them. And the tradition changed in the late 1700s, early 1800s, when the New Age community kind of started to really form. But, I just sat down this afternoon and I had to laugh because in my head, when you talked about people showing up in the comments, and I've seen it and I'm laughing because I'm wondering what they're going to say. I sat down and I wrote about Saint Irenaeus today, talking about a tarot card. So, and I was quoting Ecclesiastes. So, it's interesting when I hear people say these things and in other people's comments about, come back to Jesus and this and that. And I'm like, but if only you knew, people. If only you knew.
Yeah, if only you knew. Jesus is right here. It's literally right here. Like, we use Jesus. We use Jesus, don't worry. I always love it when people who don't, know anything about how divinatory methods really came into existence, and how a lot of the ones that really survived, throughout history, are really the ones that have a lot of Christian messaging. Like, if you just look through the Rider-Waite Tarot, there is so much Christian mysticism in it. And a lot of it is very biblical.
Arthur Edward Waite was a Christian mystic.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a ton. And even if you look at a lot of the Christian Science stuff, that's even that really came about, in the late 1800s, 1900s. That stuff really, there's a lot of really interesting work that came from there that really had an influence on what modern mysticism is today. So the whole idea that we have completely, lost our way, I would beg to differ. I would beg to differ.
I would too. I would strongly beg to differ because once you start studying, especially like tarot history, and you realize where all this stuff comes from, and why the church was, so eager to stamp it out, because they certainly don't want anybody knowing that the kingdom of heaven can be found within.
Right, Gospel of Thomas. Yeah. I had I kind of had a little rabbit hole that I went down when I was in 10th grade. And so this would have been around 2021, 2022. I really started going into metaphysical Christianity, like what that looks like. And that was really my gateway, like my true gateway to what metaphysics can offer anyone, not even just through the realm of Christianity. Now, don't get me wrong. If you just look at my bookshelf, I have so much knowledge and experience with metaphysical Christianity, but I have learned that that's not necessarily that's not the way for metaphysics, if you know what I mean. It's a good place to see. It's a good facet of it. It's very fascinating to learn about. It's very good place to start. But then once you realize that metaphysics exists outside of religion, it really opens your doors.
Yes.
So, like you were saying before, you're on Patreon, you're on Substack. What other social media platforms are you also active on where people can find you?
I have an Instagram. I took it off my phone. I have Facebook. I rarely use Instagram or Facebook. I have them, but I use them so seldom that half the time I have to log back in and recover. I just don't use them that much anymore. And I'm on, like I said, I use Substack. I use Patreon. I have a YouTube account, but it looks very empty there. But all of my private Patreon videos, there's a lot of stuff there, it's just private. I have a TikTok, which I haven't used a lot for the last couple of years. I find, like, I like TikTok. It's fun to scroll through, but I don't really feel like it doesn't feel like home. But when I, like, so, it's, I like to write. I don't like to talk. So I really enjoy Substack. If you want to find me, that's where I am.
There's a lot of good stuff on your Substack as well. So I would definitely recommend everyone listening to go check out the Numerology Lady over on Patreon and Substack. This was an excellent conversation. Is there anything else that you want to mention before we leave, or we cover pretty much everything?
I think we're good. Chatting with you, looking past you at your bookshelf.
Yeah, so a little funny thing about my bookshelf is that everything above here is organized by category. So, like, this is fiction, youth fiction, this is young adult fiction, that's some more young adult fiction, and then that's, like, nonfiction slash, like just other weird miscellaneous stuff. So, like, I have, don't shoot me, but I have some Joy Behar books, I have some books on just political matters and things, and then down here I actually have my hymn book collection. It's like, because I collect those things, even though I'm not a Christian.
What that was.
Yeah, even though I'm not a Christian, I still collect Christian hymn books because I write my own metaphysical music as well, and so what I do is I take because a lot of the tunes to those songs were not necessarily written to be Christian hymns. I'm kind of going through and being like, oh, well, if Christianity stole that, let me go in and kind of go back into what it originally was meant, kind of stuff like that. And then over here is just kind of where I nerd out, like anything religion, anything extra goes there. Now, all of my really good stuff is actually down here. So, like, those are, so, like, that's where I go into my astrology books, the stuff that I just don't really want people looking behind me and seeing, because I use this background for everything. I use it for school stuff, I use it for, all sorts of different things. But, so I have, all of my metaphysical stuff is down on the bottom shelf, not only because, A, I can reach it there, but also, B, easy access, but also, a lot of the stuff that I have, like, for example, a lot of the books that I have are not necessarily beginner friendly, and so I don't want people who might be watching my TikToks to go in and look at those books and be like, ooh, he has it, he's good, I want that, and be able to expect to do, because there's a lot of stuff that, like, in the wrong hands, it could be really hard to rectify, so, because it could bleed down it could create more problems than it could solutions. So I always keep my astrology stuff down there for that reason. Just because it's not beginner friendly, and a lot of people want to run before they can crawl. So that's kind of how I solve that issue. But still, very Sagittarian fashion, I have a bookshelf in my background. Alright, y'all, thank y'all so much for tuning in this week. Nicole is absolutely wonderful, and I'm so glad I was able to bring her onto the podcast. I have Nicole's links in the show notes, so make sure y'all go check them out and give them a little click. Who knows, maybe numerology might be a field of study that you're really interested in going deeper with. Nicole has fantastic resources, and I can tell you from my correspondences with her that she is the real deal with a substantial amount of expertise. Next week I have on an astrologer who I am grateful to consider one of my friends, Shelby Lordy. She has made an appearance on In the Stars in the past before she began practicing astrology professionally, but now that she's in the professional scene, I thought I'd have her back on to chat astrology with. Again, thank y'all so much for tuning in, and I'll see y'all tomorrow.